All right, how's it going, folks? Welcome
Good.
back to another of the Daily Stars opinion page Zoom chats. I am your host, Edward Salaya. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Brown and David Fitzsimmons. How are you two today?
Doing great.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So, we are also joined by a group of comedians today, which is pretty appropriate since it is April Fools. We brought the fools. We're the April. Uh, so we've got Dave Membrila. Dave
Membrila.
Membrila. Gotcha.
Way to go, Latino man.
How are you, David?
Oh, good. Outstanding. I'm the middle of teaching school and loving being able to get out for Zoom sessions.
That is good to hear. Good to hear.
Dave, you said you had to scoot and then you'll come back.
I scoot in about 5 minutes. I'm gonna scoot, take roll, get my class started, and I'll be right back.
Sounds like a plan. All right. So we've got Nancy Stanley as well, and I believe she'll be holding court from here on out.
Now, wait a minute. That was not the deal.
So how are you today, Nancy?
I'm good. It's Thursday and getting to Friday is a big goal for me. So
4/5 of the way there.
yeah, that's right. I can't do math, but yes, 4/5 is the way there. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Well, Dave, why don't I let you go ahead and do a little bit more extensive biography of our two guests?
Oh,
And
I'd
then
be happy to.
hand it over to you.
These two ancients have been doing comedy in this corner of the planet for decades, if not centuries. They both headline. They're both experienced professional comedy writers and performers. Oddly enough, they've chosen rather normal lives, though, on the side to support that comedy habit. Nancy Stanley is the assistant dean at the College of at the University of Arizona. And Dave Membrila is an educator who teaches at St. John's. He's also a hypnotist. And if you need a house, real estate man, right there. But I've been blessed to know them both for eons, and they are natural, gifted comedians. And I think ladies first, or perhaps we'll just wait until Dave leaves, we can talk about them. But I guess what I want to know from both of you first and foremost is, what on earth happened to you? Why in God's name would you choose to do comedy, which seems like such a foolish enterprise? When did it happen, and what happened? Nancy?
Mama is in your background.
Yeah.
So
I'm
I was 57 years old and my children were getting ready to leave home and my marriage was unspooling. I knew it wouldn't survive their flight. And I was just kind of not knowing what I was going to do for the rest of my life, other than work, which I do a lot. And I went to see the comic Blue is Black one night in Phoenix. I took my 17-year-old son. That's the way we bonded. And I just remember it being visceral. Just, I want to do that. And I think I thought that maybe if I dug into this and learned this complicated thing, that it would be a place to put my energy, like I had put my energy into child rearing or work. So that's how I got here.
No. Yeah, that's how you got there. But would you thought of yourself as a person with a good sense of humor much of your life?
I have a good sense of humor, but I never thought I was particularly funny.
Wow. What I find so delightful about your comedy is it's written like it's carved in marble. I think your word choice is always perfect. So that takes us kind of a curious sort of talent, the gift to understand how to create a joke and how to deliver a joke and how to sell a joke. I'm curious about where you learned those skill sets.
Unfortunately, you learn the hard way, which is being on stage and nobody laughing at the way you've constructed that joke. So I do think I'm more technical in the way I approach things. I'm not a person who can get up and riff just naturally all the time. That is not me. And I really wordsmith things. With some audiences, I feel, different, but no, I really work on the mechanics of a joke and the mechanics of a set.
I have to interrupt you, and I think that's because knowing you forever, I think that's because you're a naturally brilliant person and curious, and you're also you're an ambitious comedian. Among my friends who are comics, you've traveled more than any other comedian I know to perform. Haven't you? You performed in New York, right?
Yeah, I have, but open mics, I mean, like no money, and you have to bring 5 people from off the street in order to get time on stage. It's not exactly something that a truly ambitious person would do. But I think because I started late and I really was engaged with it, and I didn't have, I was in a good place in my life. You get a little older, you don't have to worry about paying the bills as much like some young comics, right?
Right.
So I had the time to throw into it. And I do think it's an intellectual enterprise. I think comedy is a really challenging intellectual enterprise. And boy, even though I've done it for 10 years, I'm still a baby at it.
I'm curious about the New York City experience. I visited the clubs. I would never do open mic at the clubs because it just seems like a Shark Tank.
It's
But
awful.
can you remember that experience? What was that like?
Oh, it's worse than you can possibly imagine. And I remember one time when I was still in that, and Dave knows this, and Fitz knows this. I was still in that time where you just live for your next set. You get off and you have so much adrenaline, and life just doesn't happen until you get a stage the next time. And I walked into some place like in the Village, and there were 8 people in the audience, and this was their big show. There were 8 people in the audience at this bar, and not a one of them spoke English.
Wow.
And so they didn't know when to laugh, and they didn't know what we were saying. They just wanted to go to an American comedy club. And things got so bad. There were like 19 comics lined up doing 5 minutes each in this deadly Bataan Death March slog of a show. And I was like 15th, and so nobody was listening. And the comic before me got so tired of performing, he laid down and curled up on the stage with the microphone in his hand and delivered his set. And I thought, oh, I've picked the wrong hobby. I have totally picked the wrong hobby.
I think that's one of the features of doing comedy is we all have what we call gigs from hell stories.
So many.
Yeah. Speaking of gigs from hell, Dave Membrila is back from teaching lovely, beautiful children. Hey, Dave.
How are you? Okay, so what's the question? What do you want me to answer?
The question is, what happened to you? Why on earth would you ever attempt comedy in front of people?
My story is I've been doing comedy for about, I would say 25 years, 22 to 25. I lost track, but I've always been the class clown. I was always the life of the party, and I wanted to start. I didn't know how to become a comedian. I mean, there's not a college for it, so I found a guy at Laughs. I went to one of the comedy shows, and it was a local DJ who was opening up, and I thought, you know what? And he was okay. He wasn't bad. I'm thinking, hey, I could be this funny. So at the time, the comedy club was getting ready to change ownerships, and so they closed down their open mics. And I got a hold of the guy at the radio station, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he gave me other places to try open mics, but they had closed down as well. And so finally, I invited him over my house to just sit in my living room and listen to about 50 minutes of my stick that I had prepared. And so he sat there and didn't laugh. I brought home a mic cord and a mic stand because I'm a music teacher. So I had that at school. And so I stood there. The mic cord wasn't even plugged in, but I wanted something in my hand to make it look as realistic as possible. Now, Joey tells everybody that I had a cardboard cutout of an audience behind me and in front of me and all over the living room. And I went through 50 minutes of my shtick, and he didn't laugh at one thing. And so afterwards, I thought, okay, well, that's it. I gave it my best shot. And he says, well, let's talk about it. I said, well, okay, well, I figured he was going to make a beeline for the door. and he says, you did this, you did this, you did this. And he started naming things, and it became apparent that he wanted to help me. And I said, but you liked it? I mean, you didn't laugh at anything. And he said this, and it always stuck in my mind. He says, comedians become immune to laughter. We can hear something funny, and while the crowd is laughing, we'll kind of chuckle and say, hey, we'll acknowledge it. That was smart, but we don't really bust a gut as much as we did when we were just audience members. And that always stuck in my mind, because sure enough, I'll go hear a comedian and think, wow, man, that's a smart joke, but I won't be doubling over in laughter as much as I used to. So he helped me get some gigs. He had me opening for him when he'd gig around town. And by then the open mics had come back to life. And the first couple times the first time I went to an open mic, and you give you 3 minutes, it was a good time, but a lot of pressure. I mean, people are sitting there staring at you, wanting you to make them laugh. And it's different than being at a party when, everybody, you're busting up anyway. So the first night I went on, I had a good time, but that was it. Next time he called me, hey, we're having another open mic. You know what? I think I'm good, man. I think I'm going to be the life of the party. He went into a De Niro tirade like the genie on Aladdin. Did you call me? Did you bug me to bring you to open mics? Did you waste my time? And so I went out to the second open mic, and it felt good. It was the same, but it wasn't for me. By the third open mic, Joey said this, look, in all seriousness, man, you called me, I didn't know you, and I don't make me feel like I wasted my time. We're having an open mic tonight, better be there. So each open mic actually got easier. So after about the third or fourth open mic, I was hooked.
And you were so good that within a couple of years, you were blacklisted because you were playing every gig offered to you simultaneously.
You don't want that story, do you?
Well, maybe. No, the story I want, we have the pandemic in mind, the present moment. I don't know, but I have found it challenging to find humor or to even draw cartoons about the issue. Have you relied on your own comedy to keep you emotionally afloat through this?
Well, what's funny is that being old school, I mean, my first computer was an Etch-a-Sketch. I had to get through learning.
That's one joke. What do you think, Nancy? One. Okay, go ahead.
Learning how to do the Zoom thing, learning how to the breakout rooms. I kind of had a funny, when I'm teaching class, I got to take a kid to the breakout room. Am I going to get in trouble for that? That's what I always thought. But even worse, my kids who are all in school here at the house, but they're using Zoom and everything else to show everybody. And I'm walking around in my underwear, and they're showing that, hey, yeah, this is our house. Hey, Dad, say hi. Shut up. Look, I'm half naked. But it was having to get used to doing Zoom and getting through this whole pandemic. I found a way my outlet was I wrote a book. I was tired of getting fat, and back in about March, I mean, it was going to be too hot to exercise in the morning. The gyms had closed down. So I thought, I'll write a book, and I kept writing and writing and writing. Before my book was close to 700 pages. So I had to trim that down. And now the good thing is my book is coming in next week.
What's the name of it?
It's called Finally Soup for the Chicken. And where the title comes from is well, I'm going to say it here, and hopefully this is going to get printed. But they have all those series, Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and I always felt sorry. All this chicken soup, I felt sorry for the chicken. So I thought my book is going to be called Finally Soup for the Chicken. So, and chicken soup was something that Mom always gave us when we were sick anyway. So I thought I'd do something nice for him.
What kind of?
You're gonna mail me a copy, right, David? So I can get that for review in the paper.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah. We are. I'm working on a press release for it as we speak. So, yes, absolutely.
I look forward to it.
And the content of the book is basically me growing up on the south side of Tucson, amidst some of the problems that happened in the hood, I took, I don't know if it was the right road, but it was a different road than a lot of my friends did. And I became a teacher, grew up, grew out, came back to the barrio to teach. I mean, the majority of my years teaching has been at a school on the south side, working with those kind of kids, with kids from impoverished neighborhoods, folks that needed me, and hopes that I could get them to get up, grow up, get out, come back, and revisit the cycle, repeat the cycle. So
It's a good mission. Nancy,
I
question
just,
I have for
I just
you
want to
is-
chime in here and say that I now hate Dave because for being productive during the pandemic, because I haven't actually reached that stage yet.
you traveled, didn't you?
No.
You didn't travel during the
What
pandemic?
happened? No, what happened is that everything closed down on March 9th or 10th. And so my first couple of months were spent dealing with, work and how to educate kids, and I was teaching. But the problem was that I had a stroke on April 28th. So I'm heading up to 1 year. And I was in the hospital and I had to have surgery and this and that. And that actually kind of overwhelmed and informed my first. I mean, I was in the hospital during the first part of the pandemic where nobody really understood spread. But there was actually humor that came out of that. I mean, it was just dark.
I have
And
to interrupt and brag on you. First time I called you, I was very anxious because I thought, how bad is Nancy's stroke? Will it be awkward? Will I have a hard time hearing you? But not only could I hear you and understand you, but I just thought your humor was amazing. Probably denial, but it was still your sense of humor in the face of the misery of it all.
well,
was
there's
just-
this whole parallelism that's going on, like the world's falling apart and I'm falling apart. And it, like there's nothing you can do but kind of laugh at the absurdity of, and I'm not saying you laugh at the pandemic, but you laugh at the absurdity of life and how we cope with it and how we try to grapple and how we make mistakes and how, life is a shit show, right? And has been for the last year. And what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? So,
What else?
so that's kind of, so I haven't, and I tried to perform on Zoom and I tried to do, but it didn't give me what I need from the energy, from the energy I expend to do comedy. I need the audience and a live audience. So I wrote a little bit, like 30 words, Dave, not,
Yeah.
7,000. And
Is
I
the
wrote a little-
comedy in your head when you perform it, or is it written somewhere?
it's absolutely written. Sometimes it's written in marker. I have a whiteboard in front of my bathroom mirror, and sometimes I write out jokes word for word. Dave Membrila and I are really different in that way because he is naturally funny.
I'm just goofy.
No, you're funny. You're funny. You think of things and you're real quick.
Yeah, and he's mentally healthy.
Wait a minute. Now,
Which
wait.
brings me, when I do comedy, one of the questions I would get is the idea of that you're broken and wounded, and you do comedy as a form of public therapy. And
I
thought,
do.
I'll run with that. Sure,
Yeah,
why
I
not?
do. I absolutely do. I mean, my favorite joke coming out of this whole thing is real self-reflective, and it is when I was in the hospital, I kept mixing up the words anesthesia and euthanasia. And that's a true story, but that's the funniest thing that's happened to me this year because the doctors would be like, what? And then are you going to give me the euthanasia? And they're like, oh, no, yeah, that's the wrong word. But so it happened so often as I was talking to the anesthesiologist that he brought in somebody to like give me a mental test. So I had to take that same test where you identify lion, cameraman, woman, and hey, I did better than Donald Trump on that test. I'm pretty sure I aced that test, but they were really concerned about my cognitive ability. So
Anesthesia, euthanasia, you're going to sleep either way.
there you go. Right. So not that different. I know.
How
But
permanent the state is just the question.
that's right. That's
So
right.
I have a quick question, and this is for both our comedians, and I've been looking for Wolf through our participants list, and he still is not there. So I'm not sure what the deal is for him. For both our comedians, I'm wondering, where do you kind of test your chops here in Tucson? I know of maybe Laughs, and I think there's one other kind of comedy shop or store. Can you do a lot here in Tucson, or does one have to go up to Phoenix or to LA or to other metro areas to really get some experience? Go first.
Well, of course, there's a local club that offers an open mic, and then there's bars that will offer open mics. The hard thing about the open mics that are at the comedy club, how it used to be, and I'm sure it's still the same way, that they used to maintain a certain structure to keep people from heckling or talking during the show, which could really get in the way of somebody performing comedy. A lot of these side gigs, the open mics that you have at bars around town, don't really do that. There's nobody that's bouncing the hecklers or asking people, hey, can you keep it down? And in fact, they're makeshift open mic nights where a lot of times folks who normally come in to drink don't expect that. So if you get a crowd that really isn't there to watch comedy, it can turn into a hell gig. And
A what gig, Dave?
I mean, can we say that? Hell gig.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
And I mean, and we've all done those. We've done like Nancy was saying. She was doing she did that gig where nobody spoke English, and I did a gig one time. And when I first started out, I used to do my stuff in a mariachi suit. I was the mariachi comic. It was corny, but it got me gigs.
Uh-huh.
The
So
mariachi comic?
I was a mariachi comic. And so I used to do a lot of Hispanic jokes when I first started out. You know, you start doing when you start as a comic, you start doing things that you're comfortable with. So I did a lot of Hispanic humor. Being Catholic, I did a lot of Catholic humor. And so one day I was hired for a corporate gig for a group of doctors who were coming in from Fort Worth for some type of convention here in town. And being Fort Worth, I thought, okay, I'm going to use my Mexican stuff will go off. It's Texas, so there's going to be Hispanics there. And when they showed up, they kept pushing me back because the bus was coming later. So my gig didn't start till about 10:30, and all these people were tired. They were over 70, 75, retired doctors. It was a Methodist hospital. So none of them were Catholic. None of them were, they were all Anglo. None of them were Mexican. So my Mexican stuff didn't work. My Catholic stuff didn't work. It got to the point where I just asked the audience, anybody know any good jokes? And that was, so that's my bit on some of the open mics. And what's really, how can I say this? What I'm cautious about when I attend the open mics is that a lot of times you have, and bless their hearts, they're trying, you have amateur comedians who want to start their own shows and they're not really sure the etiquette for shows. And they're doing their best they can. They're doing the best with what they know how. So they don't know enough to keep the sidebar conversations at a minimum and being able to deal with that kind of stuff. But they do try because they want to get out there and do it.
Yeah, you can only ask your friends to come to see your comedy about 3 or 4 times, and then they're done with it. You know, I mean, so you do have to find venues. I started at Laughs. Well, I performed for the very first time on a cruise ship, on a comedy cruise, and they
You did?
Yeah, it was the Lewis Black comedy cruise. It was Lewis Black, Kathleen Madigan, Vic Henley. And so they
Kathleen Madigan? How cool.
Yeah, she's awesome. She comes here a lot. But they had a night where people could try their own material. And of 13 people, mine was the best. And so a guy came up to me and he writes and produces. He was an SNL writer. And he said, I think you have an act, but here's going to be your problem. You're not going to go over really well with the 21 to 24-year-old boys who go to comedy clubs. that isn't going to be your shtick. And of course, I didn't believe him, and I tried that for a while, and he was right. I'm kind of a novelty in open mics because I'm older and female, but he was right generally. So I tried, I threw off really cheap jokes and a lot of cougar stuff in the early years, right? Because that's what you could actually get a laugh on. But then I decided, if I'm going to spend my time and have to sit in bars till midnight, I'm not even a big drinker anymore. Talked to Dave when we were in high school together, and that's a different story. But so I decided that I was going to start my own show. And as Dave points out, I thought, oh, we can get a weekly crowd here. And after 2 weeks, it was like, boom. But we did find that if we did it about 6 times a year, and it's called the Estrogen Hour. And we did find that if we did it, and we also got women involved in doing it, finding their comedy voice for the first time, that it was really productive. And then we started raising money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and that kicked us up another level because we could draw audience that wanted to come to support that cause. So I was, I think, pretty strategic in how I developed my own audience, and I have a primarily women's audience here in town. When I'm in New York or I'm in other places, I just recouple my set. Yeah, you've been one of our guestosterones.
Yes, I want to tell everyone on this Zoom, if you want a sampler of comedy, no better experience than the Estrogen Hour. And particularly, I have to say, as a guy, you feel like you're hearing secret stuff. And it's really funny because the performers are relaxed and they're talking about themselves, and so much of it just resonates. Yeah, it's Estrogen Hour is awesome. It's wonderful.
It's really kind of a combination of storytelling and personal revelation. And for women starting in comedy, I think particularly older women, even though we might be accomplished professionally, getting up there and having to be yourself and making people laugh is really the subject of a great amount of fear. And I usually have to twist people's arms and babysit them. And I've had more than one person standing on deck next to me 30 seconds from going on stage like, I can't do this, screw it, and walk away. So yeah, so it's been really fun. Actually putting the show together has made me a better comic, watching other people's work and helping them.
You end up coaching a little, right? Did you do a little coaching, a little mentoring?
I do a lot of coaching now, and it's funny because I'm not a great comic, but I'm a way better coach than a comic.
Yeah, you're a great comic. And Dave, you're working on a show, aren't you?
I'm working on a couple different shows. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, please put this on your calendar. August 22nd, we are doing a comedy roast as a fundraiser, and we are roasting none other than Mr. David Fitzsimmons. So that's going to be at 2:00 at the El Casino Ballroom. We already have the comedians lined up. Nancy's going to be one of the comedians, and a lot of his closest comedian friends. Marty Bishop's going to be is in the lineup, and we're going to have a good time. We are trying to raise money for. We're trying to erect a statue in honor of Dr. Alfredo Valenzuela, who's a retired mariachi teacher at Davis Bilingual School. Basically, what he's done is he's created a whirlwind of mariachis in the schools over the years that he's taught, that everybody's grown up to either become professional mariachis or teachers, etc. And he's just one of the icons in Tucson that has created that. So we want to honor him with a bronze statue. The statue is going to be created by Luis Mena, who is the local artist here in town. He did the statue at the base of a mountain and at the fire station downtown, and recently completed a Cesar Chavez statue that's going to be, I think, housed at 5 Points, if that hasn't happened.
Dave, have you seen the statue? It's right in front of, it's in the worst possible, it's a beautiful statue. But what's right behind it is the Clyde Wansley ugly but honest sign. So you have Cesar Chavez standing there. It's noble, it's beautiful, it's uplifting, it's inspiring. And right behind him in giant red type on a white board is ugly but honest, Cesar Chavez.
Oh,
we're gonna have to take a chainsaw late at night. Yeah. So you guys are staying, one thing about comedy in this town, you really have to hustle if you want to do well.
You do. Yeah, there's no making a living. For me, there's no making a living at comedy.
You know, could you make a living working? I think hospitals, as well as having chaplains, they should have comedians.
Okay. Boy, if we thought it was hard in a pandemic, imagine being the person who follows the chaplain around room to room in a hospital.
That's true.
Dave can have that job. I'm not taking
Yeah.
Who's dying here? Who's dying? Wow.
that.
Can you repeat
Now
the
I'm
date?
dying.
Huh?
Can you repeat the date and time of the event at El Casino? Somebody asked in the chat.
August 22nd. You want me to put it in the chat? I'll put it in the chat as well. August 22nd at 2:00 in the afternoon at the world famous El Casino Ballroom in South Tucson.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hey,
Perfect.
can I plug as long as we're plugging?
Sure.
I
We're
don't
not
have an
plugging.
I don't have an estrogen hour planned anytime soon, but I'm going to put my name in the chat next April 11th, which is Sunday. So it's not Easter Sunday, but the next Sunday. Lewis Black is doing a Zoom chat to benefit the students at the law school. They're establishing a gift fund to help support their fellow students with mental health needs and insurance needs for, and so he's going to do a chat and it's $10. And I think it'll be real fun. I'm interviewing him for part of the time. So I'm also asking for questions and taking questions. So
That will be fun.
yeah.
How long have you known him? So I guess
10
since the
years. I
cruise.
met him on that cruise.
On that cruise. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a long commute for a gig, isn't it? A cruise.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Nancy, someone also wrote in the chat, they said, is this the Nancy Stanley who wrote kids' books about math?
Right. No, but the only books I could write about math would be kids' books if I would do that. So no.
Yeah. And you certainly didn't write Flat Stanley.
And they,
No.
and they
Very
wouldn't be
funny.
appropriate for kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I get a little blue. So yeah, no writing for kids.
Yeah, you are naughty, which
I
is
am.
good. You just use strong descriptive language.
Well, it's also strategic. It's unexpected. It gets a laugh.
Were you
well-
like that in your speech before you found comedy? Or
Oh
did
yeah,
you
I've
find
always
that?
been, I was raised Southern Baptist, and as a result, my siblings and I just have filthy mouths because that's what happens when you have strict Southern Baptist parents.
Bless your heart.
We compete, you know, with each other. So yeah, I've always been a little bit blue. But it was also strategic when you're playing to a younger crowd. How do you let them know you're on somewhat of the same wavelength you use their words?
Yeah, I never thought your comedy was gratuitous in that manner. I mean, your use of language was gratuitous, which it can be. You might see that occasionally on open mic with a young amateur who has no jokes, and all he or she does is just curse. And so, get off the stage, please.
Well, the worst open mic I ever saw was at Laughs, and it was a guy who said, "I'm just going to get up and riff." And when he got up, he wasn't nervous before he got up there with his really bad idea about going up and riffing. And once he got up there, he started shaking and he said, he only had like 3 minutes, but he managed to disrobe. He had to get his shirt off and he was starting to take his pants off. And it wasn't even funny. I mean, we were just kind of, and what Dave says is like everybody at the back of the room, all the comics were like not laughing, like what's going on? It was, that was a pretty weird open mic.
Well, maybe if he fully finished taking his clothes off, it would get funny.
Right? Or
Yeah.
something, you know, but
I love those. Those stories are so much more fun than I had a great gig story. The audience loved me. Oh, by the way, what do you think is a better audience? And this, I want to frame the question. I once did a group of neurosurgeons, not a laugh the entire hour. I'm off stage and a couple of them surround me and they're saying things like, "You were quite amusing. I nearly laughed. You were so funny." Like, oh my gosh. You know, it's that very logical, literal mind that sort of examines and studies the jokes you're telling and then, oh, that was
Right.
a surprise.
right.
Yeah. So what is a better audience? Male, female, nuns, orphans?
A paying audience.
Yeah, I like date night. I like date night at a comedy club. I mean, I like my women's audience, but they're mine. But if we have to go outside my own show, I like date night because The men aren't as likely to heckle or be disrespectful or talk because they're with their dates. And I have to say that comedy clubs are really cisgendered. I mean, they're really traditional in that way. And it's really easy. If the women are having a good time, the men laugh and there's a lot of energy in the room. My worst audience is a group of women out to celebrate some event that one of them is having, a baby shower, a bachelorette party. They're the worst. They're the worst.
Really?
Yeah, because the women get really drunk and want to help you finish your jokes and help you, and suggest material for you while you're standing on the stage. So I don't know if they do that to male comics, but they do it to female comics.
Wow. I love hecklers. Because I can always pull them up on stage and draw them.
Oh, right.
Naked.
That shuts them up, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have Eddie, you want to explain the question feature, the hand feature, if anyone wants to ask our comics any questions?
I probably couldn't describe it as well as Sarah could, but if any of you would like to enter into the chat some of your questions, me and Sarah are both watching that that's coming across. But Sarah, do you want to walk people how you go through your technological raise of the hand?
Yes, so we will look for your physical hand, but we've got a bigger group, so it's hard to see. So please raise your virtual hand. You can do that on a couple different ways. Either click on the bottom on reactions and click raise hand. That's probably what it looks like if you're on a PC. If you're on an Apple device, more than likely you're going to need to click participants, click your name, and then click raise hand. And the other option is you might see 3 dots that say more. When you click more, then it would give you the option to raise your hand. So any of those ways, we'll look for your hand and call on you if you guys have comments or questions for any of our guests. We encourage it.
We left them terrified.
Oh, Robin's got his hand already up. He figured it out.
Yeah.
Oh, good, good.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Robin. There we go.
When does the comedy start?
Sing. All right.
I've been in Dangerfields in New York. It's kind of tough on me because all the Johns are in the basement. And that's not too good for guys in a wheelchair.
Robin, do you have 2 devices on at your location?
Yeah, I got my iPhone on too. I'll turn it on.
Yeah, because we can barely hear what you're saying because there's an echo.
Or a
Okay.
bird that got loose.
This calls to mind a memory of a comedian named Gene Michener, who suffered terribly from MS and used a wheelchair. And his humor was astonishing, hilarious, funny, never bitter. And that's when humor can be really powerful.
Yeah.
When it humanizes a human being.
Yes. And, punching down, I was talking to a group of people the other day, because I'm really interested in the sociology of comedy, how comedy, how what's radioactive in comedy changes over time. And we were talking about, like, when I grew up, ethnic jokes were like, you just told those, they were funny, you laughed. And we talked about how punching down has even gotten more sensitive in the pandemic, because not only do you have all the usual, like, socioeconomic and ethnic and political stuff, but then you've got people and you don't know where they are if they're coming to Zoom. You don't know if they've lost family members. You don't know if they are themselves or have had COVID. And so it's just this, it's one thing to say, and I do believe that everything's on the table in terms of comedy. I don't think there are any natural censors for comedy. But on the other hand, if you want to engage people, you have to know where they are. Zoom prevents you from knowing where they are. It does me. And then just the social environment, it prevents us from knowing where we're hitting people, and it's harder to write that way. So I don't know. I've had trouble with that.
I find it easiest and a safe bet to write about myself and my own flaws and failings, particularly in front of audiences which are going to essentially be somewhat hostile because I'm a public figure. So I use a lot of self-deprecating humor. And if I ever do ethnic humor, it's about being Irish. But Dave and I, we have to give up so much sexist humor thanks to me too, haven't we, Dave?
Yeah, and you know, people, many comedians have their own philosophy on how to do comedy. Some folks say, "Hey, there's no line." I myself feel like I've learned over the years that some things aren't funny, and so I stay away from different subjects. And it's just it's a personal choice myself. It's just something I've had to learn because I don't want to offend anybody. I did a joke, and I don't want to do it here, but it was one of the funniest jokes, and it was a pretty mean joke, and it just bothered me that that I did it. So I just stopped doing it. Thought, you know what, I can write better than that. So I just, but yeah, the sexist stuff, it gets. I mean, especially now in our days and age, where everything is so politically correct, I just stay away from that line altogether.
Do either of you ever use your private life as material in terms of family members? You might not name them in a joke or a routine. But...
Oh, I name them. I name them. I have no problem
Why
with
Dave
it.
eats Thanksgiving alone, but you know.
Even like today, it's my nephew's birthday, and he was born on April 1st, and he grew up his whole life being called, of course, April Fools. But now in this day of age, you know, he's always worried about people playing jokes on him, that when somebody says happy birthday, he says thank you, I think.
I don't use family members except as contrast to me being stupid, them being smart, or them being, you know, me being in trouble, them not be. I've told a few jokes involving my mom, but I've always vetted them with my mom. My children hate it when I talk about them. I do actually talk about my kids a little more than I probably should. They hate being the butt of my jokes, but they're the only people in my life who I would make the butt of jokes because I gave birth to them and I figure I'm entitled. But
yeah.
My mom is a twin, and she's a boy-girl twin. My uncle and my mom were born, and they were pretty much identical, except my mom's mustache was a little thicker.
I just saw my 36-year-old daughter this past weekend. She asked me if I was still doing that joke, and I said, yeah. It's the one where I would say I often get angry hate mail. I even get death threats. I even got car bomb death threats. But those were okay for my daughter because that's when I gave her $1 to start my car in the mornings. I like that one. She didn't think it was funny. I always thought it was funny.
well, I do think we all have along that line jokes that we can't give up. Like when you write a really good joke and you know that it's going to land 9 out of 10 times, no matter where you are. I mean, you like, it's your baby. You've gestated that joke. And I've told a couple of the same jokes for like 10 years and finally retired them. But aren't they, don't you have ones of Dave's, don't you have jokes like that you don't want to give up because you know they'll last, they might be cheap or too repetitive or everybody's heard them, but you don't want to give them up.
Yeah, in fact, I've had some of those jokes stolen from me.
You become an icon.
And I was after a guy who was in LA who started out, and what happens is that when they start out as an open micer and they're not really ready to move to LA, they think that if they move to LA, they're gonna all of a sudden shine.
Right.
And I helped him as an open micer, and he said he was moving to LA, and next thing I know, I did a joke. I was on stage at last, and people were saying, "Yeah, man, that's a funny joke. This guy does it on BET." And I said, "Who's the guy that does it?" And it was that guy that I was helping.
Oh my
I said,
gosh.
he does it. And he said, "Yeah." So I was sending him pretty much death threats almost weekly. Hey, man, if I hear you doing my joke, I'll try to help you. And yeah, so that happens a lot with comics.
Would either of you be willing to share maybe 3 or 4 of your favorite fail-safe jokes?
Oh, shoot, I'd have to think of a one is I'm proud to be Mexican, and nowadays I don't know what I'm called, Mexican, Chicano, or Hispanic. So I decided to combine those 3 words. So now when people ask me what's my ethnicity, I say Mexican, Chicano, Hispanic. I think that makes me a mechanic. Oh, that's probably my most favorite.
So we've
And
got,
that's the one the guy stole. That joke right there is the one the guy stole.
Mine are too blue, but one that on Zoom comedy calls I've been getting lately, and it's just stupid. It's just a sentence. There's nothing well crafted about it or anything. But I talk about being alone at this age, and I was looking forward to having an active dating life. And I go, if I'd known this pandemic was going to last a goddamn year, I would have kidnapped somebody. And there's nothing essentially funny about that joke, but there are like women who are like, yeah, tell me about it. And it goes back to the sexism too. You guys could not tell that joke. I mean, I suppose you could in a friendly audience, but the idea of you kidnapping somebody is not funny.
Yeah.
And it's hilariously funny to think of me doing that, right? So not really hilarious, but I do take advantage. I do take advantage of the gender card that I can play that guys can't. I just do.
Yeah.
I won't be able to forever because that's equaling out and it's becoming hard to talk about. It's not going to be in fashion in about a year, I think, to tell that joke. But I'll tell it as long as I can get a laugh.
Yeah.
The good thing with me is that as I get older, I can keep writing older and it still works for me. So I've been using it for years. Like I'm at the age where acid reflux is a flavor. That's all I'm saying. and I mean, and as I get older, I start to get fatter and heavier. I mean, at one time I was buff and now I'm buffet. So those are ones that I keep.
Yeah, I can't do recreational drugs anymore because they interfere with my calcium supplement. So that's funny.
Okay, I saw my ex-wife a couple of weeks ago and she said, remember when we were married? I said, I got your cartoons. I was faking it. So bitter.
Oh, somebody writes in the chat, it seems timing is a big part of the, if the joke goes over, absolutely. And that's learning timing and not to step on yourself when you're nervous in your first beginning, not taking time for the silence or for your audience to catch up is really a common thing that people do. And you slow down and enjoy the joke and even do it a little bit longer, just to the point where people get uncomfortable from the silence.
Well,
So
that's
do
a
you
good point.
find, talking about silence, do you find that, let's say you have a set prepared and, you have this joke, this joke, this joke, this joke. Do you find that you change that according to like the order of things because of the reactions you're getting, thinking, oh, this is going to fit better, or, the timing's better on that?
Dave, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm going to go first and then I got to skip out, start my next class and I will be right back. Yes, there was a lesson that was taught to me by my mentor when I first started. The first night I did comedy, the very first night that I did it as a professional, I killed. I was like, awesome. Oh man, I'm going to be bigger than Jerry Lewis. The second night, same material, different crowd, bombed. Crickets left the room. That's how bad it was. And when I got off stage, the first thing my mentor said is, how did you think it went? Oh, this doggone crowd, it was terrible and this and that. And he just sat there and shook his head. And I said, what? He says, your job, what is your job? I said, to make the crowd laugh. And he says, and if your material doesn't do it, you better come up with something quick. And I'll never forget that. So back to your question, yes, if what I'm doing is not working, I need to switch gears, even if it means getting out of my comfort zone and going out in the audience and just talking to them and trying to figure out what's funny, because then you're in desperation mode. I was going to bounce that on off of what Nancy said. To me, the thing that I fear most is what I'm going to say if a joke bombs. I've got to be able to come back and bring the audience back to me. If the joke gets no laugh or it gets oohs or ahs or that kind of stuff, I need to bring them right back so I have them. With that, I'm gonna leave, and that's my time. No, I'll be right back. You go start that other.
Who
I'll be
lit
right
him?
back.
Somebody lit him.
Tip the assistant principal and drive carefully.
What was the
Yeah.
question? What were we talking about?
I don't, Nancy, what he just said reminded me, I think one of the reasons Carson was such a success was because he was a master at recovering from a bad joke. He would just
Yeah.
observe that he had just told a bad joke and he would make fun of his failure to tell a good joke. And that's what made him a pleasure to watch way back in the Jurassic Age.
So there's this, I don't think I'm a joke teller. I deliver punchlines, but I'm not a joke teller. I mean, I have a punchline for everything I do. But unlike when I first started, most of my stuff, most of my little component parts of a set last 20 seconds, which is really long, 15, 20 seconds to set up. But it's really, so for audiences that I'm really familiar with or audiences that have good energy, if something goes wrong in an audience that otherwise kind of gets you and is otherwise coming along, they just didn't like that joke. It's real fun to just go like, what is wrong with you? That joke was worth a better laugh. And then they laugh at that. But if you're, like I've had a table of really drunk correctional officers and I'm doing some fairly progressive liberal humor, and there's nothing that would have made that better. The best you can hope for is to get the words out of your mouth, to hear considerate practice, just to hear the words out of your mouth and then get the hell off stage. That's, I've bailed more than one. I always manage to fill my time, but trying to think, Dave, let's see. Dave, let me tell you something. Dave one time couldn't make David Simmons an event. And so he had me do the event and he said, I've done it for years and they're very, and they were really nice people.
Right.
But it was 8 a.m. in the morning. We aren't going to say who. It was 8 a.m. in the morning and there was no alcohol involved. And my comedy actually gets better when you're drinking. And so there was, and the person just before me was a preacher who delivered like a welcome and then prayed. So that was tough. And then I performed once in front of Sandra Day O'Connor and she was sitting like 5 people in front of me. And I have some slightly off color, but not terribly off color content, but I couldn't get her to laugh at all. So I had a scarf in my pocket that I had taken off before I walked up and I offered it to her as a gift to get her to laugh. And she did finally, but so I didn't win that set. In fact, it was a competition and the guy who won had never been on a stage before and told knock knock jokes and I got third. So that's how that day went. Yeah.
Ginsburg would have laughed.
Yeah, right. Actually, O'Connor was really nice about it, but she didn't find any of it funny. She wasn't having any of it.
Oh man. All right. So we got one more question from the audience from Robin again. Robin, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, I appreciate hearing this, but I've saw some great professional comedians at the U of A over the years. This last year, nobody showed up, but I'm sorry, I got to get going. I promised Dr. Biden that I'd call her so she can wake up Major and Joe. It's time for their hot milk. Take it easy.
Have a good one.
Okay.
All right. So we've got a couple of other questions here. In general, what do you both think about punning as a main source of material for a show?
I think it's awesome if you can do it. I don't have that skill.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of grating after about 20 minutes. Maybe more like 10, but.
Well, Carlin didn't pun, but he did wordplay and he sometimes fit puns into things. and he dissected language, and that was always interesting. I just think you have to be at such a high level and such a confident deliverer of that I don't feel, and really quick, and I don't feel like I've got that.
What are your feelings, Dave?
Okay.
Alan Hershowitz had his hand up too.
Oh, no. I was just saying 5 minutes on puns.
Oh.
You were saying maybe 10 and I went, no.
Oh, yeah, don't even raise your hand here. We'll call on you.
Believe me, I do
Funny
a lot
spelled
of puns.
backwards is enough, and we've had enough.
Oh, funny.
Dave's still laughing.
If it's gonna work, I'm gonna use it. The bad thing about puns is one of the things that almost as bad as bombing is getting the oohs or the type of jokes. So, and that's what punning will attract. So I don't try to use it too much. If I'm going to do it, it's like Nancy said, it's got to be smartly strategized in my set.
I wonder if you might use a device such as I use when I talk about my bladder cancer experience. I love to slow down when I'm describing the experience of being catheterized, just to enjoy the agony on the men's faces in the audience.
No.
And the women are just, they think it's the funniest darn thing. Oh gosh, yeah. You know, pain is such a significant part of humor.
Yes.
Well,
It is.
folks, we are coming up on our hour, so I do want to let our comedians go ahead and do any more shout outs or plugs for any sort of events or things that are coming up soon. So go ahead and take it away, folks.
Well, again, and if you don't mind, Nancy, I'll jump in first so I can get back in my class. We've got the David Fitzsimmons roast that's coming up on August 22nd. We also David and I wrote a radio play last year that almost to the exact day before COVID was announced, everything was shut down. We actually performed it, and it had a variety of cast of not only comedians, but we had sportscasters and newscasters, and it was a fun time, and we raised about $6,000. I'm a hypnotherapist and a comedy hypnotist, so if anybody's looking to help, needs help raising funds or something like that, give me a call. And of course, we hope to see everybody on August 22nd.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David.
I'll just plug a couple of things. If you feel like you've got comedy inside of you and it's something you'd like to explore, there are a whole bunch of places. I mean, I don't know if the Tucson.com is still doing the storytelling stuff, but I've done that, and that can be funny and very fun to craft, and you get to meet people and craft with them. The Estrogen Hour takes mostly female, but we wouldn't be opposed to male. I do comedy coaching kind of for free. Sometimes I run classes, and I've been at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. I do a little bit for various nonprofits around town when they want to do stuff. So there are plenty of ways to find out. There's female storytellers in town. Odyssey storytelling is great. And storytelling is a good way to start listening to people and imagining what your act would look like, even though stand-up is a much more condensed version. So I left my email in the chat. Feel free to contact me if you'd like to talk more about that.
Awesome. Nancy, David, thank you both so much for joining us here today. I think I speak for all of us when I say that I think we all needed this sort of break from the pandemic and from everything that's going on these last few months, last year, really. And it's really been appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to be here. Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. Well, that'll wrap it up for us today. We'll go ahead and let you know who our guests will be next week. We've got a few irons in the fire on that. But until then, please watch our space in the opinion pages, and we'll watch you here when you're back next week. You guys have yourselves a good one.
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Guys, next time.
Bye.